My name is Daniel Thompson, and until 6 months ago I thought I had the perfect life. I'm 32, work as a master mechanic at Rodriguez Auto Shop in Austin, Texas, and I was married to what I believed was the most amazing woman in the world, Lindsay. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 10, and I genuinely thought we were soulmates. I should have known something was wrong when she stopped stealing my French fries. It sounds ridiculous, but Lindsay had this habit since we started dating. She'd order a salad at restaurants, then systematically steal half my fries while claiming she wasn't that hungry. Was our thing. Our little ritual that made other couples roll their eyes and me fall more in love with her quirky ways. But sometime around March she stopped. Just like that. She'd sit there eating her salad, completely ignoring my plate. When I offered her some, she'd politely decline with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That should have been my first red flag, but I was an idiot in love. The real warning signs started in April. Lindsay had always been punctual, military-level punctual. She'd walk through our front door at exactly 5:37 p.m. every weekday, sometimes 5:35 if traffic was light. I could set my watch by her arrival. But suddenly she started coming home later. First 15 minutes, then 30, then sometimes not until 7 or 8 in the evening. Extra projects at the agency, she'd explain, kissing my cheek as she hung up her designer blazer. Another new thing I'd noticed. When had she started wearing blazers? You know how crazy things get when we're pitching to new clients? I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Lindsay worked at Patterson and Associates, one of Austin's most prestigious advertising agencies. She was their senior creative director, and I was proud of her success. If she was working late to climb the corporate ladder, I was supportive. Hell, I was making good money at the shop. We could afford for her to chase her dreams. But then came the Wednesday that changed everything. I'd been working on this vintage 1969 Mustang for 3 weeks. A real beauty with a 428 Cobra jet engine that perched like a lion when you revved it. The owner, Mr. Patterson, no relation to Lindsay's boss, just one of those coincidences, had finally come to pick it up, and he was so impressed with the restoration that he tipped me $300 in cash. I was feeling generous and romantic. It had been a while since Lindsay and I had done something spontaneous together. We'd fallen into this routine of work, dinner, TV, sleep, repeat. I missed the early days when we'd drive out to Lake Austin on random Tuesday nights just to watch the sunset. So I decided to surprise her. I stopped by Giuseppe's, this little Italian place she'd discovered downtown that made her favorite prosciutto and arugula pizza, and ordered 2 large pies with extra everything. The plan was simple: show up at her office, sweep her off her feet, and take her for an impromptu dinner picnic by the lake. Patterson and Associates occupied the 15th floor of the Frostbank Tower, all glass and chrome and the kind of modern elegance that made my work clothes feel shabby. I'd only been there a handful of times, company Christmas parties, the occasional lunch when Lindsay forgot her wallet, but I knew my way around. The security guard in the lobby, a friendly older guy named Marcus who always remembered my name, looked confused when I asked to go up. "Mrs. Thompson?" he said, checking his log. "She left about an hour ago, around 4:30. Are you sure you have the right day?" My stomach dropped. It was 5:45 p.m. on a Wednesday. Lindsay should have been upstairs, buried in whatever project was keeping her late. I stood there holding 2 boxes of rapidly cooling pizza, feeling like an idiot. Maybe she had a client meeting? I suggested weakly. Marcus shrugged sympathetically. Could be. You want me to call up to her office? No, that's okay. Probably just wires crossed. Thanks, Marcus. I walked back to my truck, my mind racing. Where was she? I tried calling her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Her cheerful voice saying, "Hi, you've reached Lindsay. I can't take your call right now, but leave me a message and I'll get back to you soon." I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes trying to make sense of it. Maybe she had left early for a doctor's appointment she forgot to mention. Maybe she was running errands. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation that I wasn't thinking of because I was tired and overthinking things. But deep in my gut, something felt wrong. I drove home and waited. The pizza grew cold on the counter. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8. Finally, at 8:23 p.m., I heard her key in the lock. "Hey babe," she called out, her voice bright and cheerful. "Sorry I'm so late. The Morrison account is being a real pain, and we had to completely restructure the campaign timeline." She looked good. Really good. Her hair was perfect despite supposedly working late, her makeup was fresh, and there was this glow about her that I hadn't seen in months. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize, a deep blue number that hugged her curves in ways that made me remember why I'd fallen for her in the first place. "I got pizza," I said, gesturing to the sad, cold boxes on the counter. Oh, you're so sweet. She kissed me and I caught a whiff of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I'm actually not that hungry though. We ordered in at the office around 6. Chinese food. You know how it is during crunch time. I nodded and smiled and pretended everything was normal. But that night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind churning with questions I was afraid to ask. The next few weeks were torture. I became hypersensitive to every little detail. The way she'd check her phone constantly, always angling the screen away from me. How she'd started taking calls in the bathroom, claiming it was work but speaking in hushed tones I could never quite make out. The new clothes that kept appearing in her closet, expensive pieces that seemed too fancy for the office. And then there was the night I woke up at 2 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at our breakfast table with her laptop open and her phone pressed to her ear. No, that won't work for tomorrow, she was saying softly. What about Thursday? I can definitely make Thursday happen. When she noticed me standing in the doorway, she quickly said, I have to go. We'll discuss the budget revisions in the morning, and hung up. Work? I asked. Sorry, babe. Crisis with the Peterson campaign. You know how these client emergencies go. She closed the laptop and stretched. I should probably get some sleep. But I noticed she was still wearing the same clothes from dinner, not pajamas. And her laptop had been closed when I walked in. She'd opened it as soon as she saw me, like a prop in a stage play. I was going crazy with suspicion, but I didn't want to be that husband. The jealous, paranoid type who checks his wife's phone and follows her around. Lindsay had never given me reason to doubt her in 8 years of marriage. She was loyal, honest, and had always been transparent about her friendships with both men and women. But then I remembered something my dad told me years ago, back when I was dating Sarah Mitchell in high school and caught her kissing Tommy Rodriguez behind the gymnasium. Son, he'd said, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't make excuses. Don't rationalize. Just believe what your eyes and gut are telling you. My eyes were telling me that my wife was lying. My gut was screaming that something was very, very wrong. So I made a decision that still makes me feel sick to think about. I decided to follow her. Friday morning, I told my boss Rodriguez that I had food poisoning and needed the day off. It wasn't a complete lie. I felt nauseous with anxiety. I waited until Lindsay left for work, then drove to the Frost Bank Tower and parked across the street where I could see the entrance. At 10:15 a.m. she walked out. She wasn't dressed for work. Gone was the professional blazer, replaced by a flowing sundress and sandals. She looked beautiful and relaxed, like she was heading to brunch with friends, not sneaking around behind her husband's back. She got into her silver Camry and drove north on I-35. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. She exited at Round Rock and pulled into the parking lot of the Domain, an upscale outdoor shopping center. I watched from my truck as she walked into Nordstrom. 20 minutes later, she came out empty-handed and sat on a bench near the fountain. She kept checking her phone and looking around like she was waiting for someone. At 11:30, a man approached her. I'd never seen him before, but everything about him screamed, successful professional. Tall, probably 6'2", with perfectly styled dark hair and wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He was handsome in that polished magazine ad way that made regular guys like me feel inadequate. He sat down next to Lindsay, and they immediately started talking and laughing like old friends. But it was the way he touched her arm when he made a point, the way she leaned into him when she laughed, that made my blood run cold. After about 10 minutes, they got up and walked toward the restaurant district. I followed on foot, staying far enough back that they wouldn't notice me but close enough to see where they went. They chose Seasons 52, an expensive place with outdoor seating. I found a spot at a coffee shop across the courtyard where I could watch them through the window. They ordered wine with lunch. Lindsay never drank during the day, claiming it made her too sleepy to be productive at work. But here she was, sipping what looked like a very expensive bottle of red wine and gesturing animatedly as she told some story that made the mystery man throw back his head and laugh. They held hands across the table. I felt like I was going to vomit. They lingered over lunch for 2 hours, completely absorbed in each other. At one point, he reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face with such tenderness that I had to look away. It was an intimate gesture, the kind of thing a man does for a woman he's deeply connected with. When they finally left the restaurant, they walked hand in hand toward the parking garage like any other couple enjoying a romantic afternoon. I followed at a distance, my legs feeling like jelly. In the garage, they stopped next to a black BMW that I assumed was his. They talked for another few minutes, then kissed. Not a quick peck between friends, but a real kiss. The kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity and passion and all the things that should have been reserved for me. I stood there behind a concrete pillar watching my wife kiss another man, and felt my entire world collapse. Lindsay got in her car and drove away. The man sat in his BMW for a few minutes talking on his phone, then left in the opposite direction. I managed to get his license plate number before he disappeared into traffic. BRK 7731. I drove home in a daze. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life implode in slow motion. When I got to our house, the house we'd bought together 3 years ago, the house where we'd planned to raise kids, the house where I'd thought we'd grow old together, I sat in my truck in the driveway for an hour trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to storm inside and pack my bags. Part of me wanted to wait for Lindsay to come home and confront her immediately. But another part of me, the part that had been in love with this woman for 10 years, needed to understand what was happening before I burned our entire life to the ground. So I went inside, cracked open a beer, and tried to pretend it was just another normal Friday. Lindsay came home at her usual late time, around 8 p.m. She was back in work clothes, she must have changed somewhere, and she looked tired in that satisfied way people do after a good day. "How are you feeling?" she asked, kissing my forehead. "Still sick." "Much better," I managed to say. "Probably just something I ate." "Good. I was worried about you." She squeezed my shoulder. "I'm going to take a shower and then maybe we can watch a movie? It's been forever since we've had a quiet night together." I nodded and tried to smile. She disappeared upstairs and I heard the shower start running. For a moment, I considered going through her purse or checking her phone, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I still had some shred of dignity left. We watched some romantic comedy on Netflix, her head on my shoulder like everything was normal. She laughed at all the right parts and even cried a little during the emotional scenes. If I hadn't seen her with another man just hours before, I would have thought we were having a perfect evening. But every time she smiled at me, every time she squeezed my hand or made a joke, I felt like I was drowning. That weekend was the longest of my life. Lindsay was home, present, and seemed genuinely happy to spend time with me. We went grocery shopping together, worked in the garden, watched college football on Sunday afternoon. She made her famous chili, the one with the secret ingredient she'd never tell anyone, not even me, and we had some of our neighbors over for dinner. To everyone else we looked like the perfect couple. Happy, comfortable, still obviously in love after 8 years of marriage. And maybe that's what made it worse. Knowing that she could compartmentalize so completely, could be genuinely affectionate with me while carrying on an affair. Monday morning I called my buddy Randy, who works for State Farm. Randy owed me a favor. I'd rebuilt the engine in his Jeep for free the year before, and he had access to DMV records. "I need you to run a license plate for me," I said. "Everything okay, man?" "I'm not sure yet." "Can you do it?" "Yeah, but this is off the books, you understand? I can't have this traced back to me." "I understand." An hour later he called me back with the information that would change everything. The BMW belonged to Kaden Mitchell, age 35, address in Westlake Hills, one of Austin's wealthiest neighborhoods. Randy had also looked him up online and found that Kaden was a senior financial consultant at Goldman Sachs, specialized in high-net-worth investment portfolios. This wasn't some random affair with a coworker or a casual fling with an old college friend. This was Lindsay involved with a wealthy, successful man who could give her things I never could. Exotic vacations, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, a lifestyle I could never afford on a mechanic's salary. I spent my lunch break parked outside Kaden's office building in downtown Austin, watching well-dressed people come and go, trying to imagine Lindsay in this world. She'd always claimed that money didn't matter to her, that she loved our modest house and simple life. But maybe she'd been lying to herself as much as to me. That evening I decided to test something. "Hey babe," I said as she scrolled through her phone at the kitchen table. "I was thinking maybe we could plan a vacation. Somewhere nice. Maybe Europe?" She looked up, surprised. "Europe? Daniel, that would cost a fortune. We can't afford something like that. We could save up. Take out a loan if we need to." "That's not very responsible," she said gently. "You know how important it is to me that we're financially stable. Maybe we could do a long weekend in San Antonio instead." San Antonio. While she was having lunch dates at Seasons 52 with a man who probably spent more on wine than we spent on groceries. "Sure," I said. "San Antonio sounds great." She smiled and went back to her phone, and I wondered if she was texting him right now, planning their next rendezvous while sitting 3 feet away from her husband. Over the next week I followed her twice more. Once to another lunch at a different upscale restaurant, and once to what looked like an art gallery opening where they mingled with other couples like they belonged there. Seeing her in that environment confident, sophisticated, laughing at conversations I probably wouldn't understand, made me realize how much she'd grown beyond the life we'd built together. The woman I'd married had been content with pizza and beer on Friday nights, watching Netflix and falling asleep on the couch together. This woman wanted wine tastings and gallery openings and conversations about quarterly portfolios. Maybe the affair wasn't just about Kaden being more attractive than me. Maybe it was about Lindsay becoming someone who needed more than I could give her. But I still needed to know the truth. All of it. The following Thursday, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of following Lindsay again, I decided to approach Kaden directly. I'd done my homework. Goldman Sachs was in the J.P. Morgan Chase Tower, 47 floors of glass and steel that made Patterson and Associates look like a small-town office. Kaden worked on the 32nd floor in the private wealth management division. I put on my best clothes, a button-down shirt and khakis that Lindsay had bought me for her last company Christmas party, and took the elevator up to his floor. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a smile that probably required weekly maintenance, looked at me like I'd wandered in from another planet. "I'm here to see Kaden Mitchell," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to see me. I'm Daniel Thompson." She looked confused but picked up her phone. "Mr. Mitchell? There's a Daniel Thompson here to see you. He says you'll want to—" "Oh, okay. Yes, sir." She hung up and looked even more confused. "He'll be right out." 2 minutes later, Kaden appeared in the lobby. In person, without the distance of my surveillance, he was even more impressive than I'd thought. Tall, confident, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck payment, but with an expression of genuine concern rather than the arrogance I'd expected. "Mr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Kaden Mitchell. Would you like to talk in private?" His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and he looked me directly in the eye. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this level of straightforward professionalism. "That would be good," I managed to say. He led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. The view was incredible. You could see Lady Bird Lake, the Capitol building, all the way out to the hill country. This was the world Lindsay had been visiting, the life she was being offered. "I've been wondering when this conversation would happen," Kaden said, closing the door behind us. "Please sit down." I remained standing. "How long?" "About 4 months." He sat down across from where I was standing, his hands folded on the polished conference table. "Look, I know this is awkward, but—" "Awkward?" I interrupted. "You're sleeping with my wife and you think it's awkward?" "I deserve that," he said calmly. "You have every right to be angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it." "I'm sure it doesn't." He was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me. "What do you want to know?" I sat down, suddenly exhausted. "Everything. I want to know everything." And that's when Kaden Mitchell told me a story that turned everything I thought I knew about my marriage completely upside down. "Lindsay came to me," he began. "Not the other way around. She was referred by a colleague at Patterson and Associates who thought she might benefit from financial planning advice." "Financial planning?" "She wanted to know about divorce settlements, asset protection, how to separate finances that had been combined for nearly a decade." He paused. "She was planning to leave you, Daniel. She had been for almost a year." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "That's impossible. We were happy. We never fought. We were planning to start trying for kids next year." "Were you? Or was that something you assumed?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. When was the last time we'd actually talked about having children? When was the last time we talked about anything meaningful at all? "She said you were a good man," Kaden continued. "She said you deserved better than a wife who was going through the motions, pretending to be happy when she wasn't. So she decided to have an affair instead of talking to me?" "The affair." Kaden ran his hand through his hair. "That wasn't planned. She came to me for financial advice and we started talking. Really talking. About dreams, goals, what we wanted our lives to look like. And somewhere in those conversations, we realized we had feelings for each other." "How romantic," I said bitterly. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. "I don't make a habit of getting involved with married clients. But Lindsay, she's remarkable. Smart, funny, passionate about things you wouldn't expect. Did you know she's been writing a novel for the past 2 years?" I stared at him. "What?" "A thriller. About a woman who discovers her seemingly perfect husband is leading a double life. She's actually quite good. She let me read the first few chapters, and I think she could get it published if she finds the right agent." "Lindsay was writing a novel?" My wife of 8 years was writing a book and I had no idea? She never told me, I said weakly. She said you wouldn't understand. That you'd think it was a waste of time, a silly hobby that took attention away from practical things. The worst part was he was probably right. If Lindsay had told me she was writing a book, I probably would have made some joke about her becoming the next Stephen King while secretly wondering why she was wasting time on something that would never pay the bills. She also mentioned that you two never really talked about the future anymore, Kaden said. Beyond the basic stuff, mortgage payments, car maintenance, whose turn it was to call the cable company. When was the last time you asked her about her dreams? I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. Look, Kaden said, I'm not trying to justify what we did. Having an affair was wrong and we both know it. But Lindsay isn't the villain here and neither are you. You're just two people who grew apart without realizing it. So what happens now? I asked. That's up to you and Lindsay. But she's been torturing herself for months, trying to figure out how to have this conversation with you without destroying your life. My life is already destroyed. Is it? Kaden leaned forward. Daniel, can I ask you something? When you think about your marriage, about your daily life with Lindsay, are you truly happy? Or are you just comfortable? The question hit me like a physical blow because I couldn't immediately answer it. When was the last time I'd felt genuinely excited to come home? When was the last time Lindsay and I had laughed together, really laughed about something other than a TV show? When was the last time we'd made love with passion instead of just going through the comfortable motions of a long marriage? She wants to tell you everything, Kaden said. She's been planning to do it after the holidays. She didn't want to ruin Christmas for you. How thoughtful, I said sarcastically, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. She's been saving money, you know. She opened a separate account 6 months ago and has been putting away every extra penny so that when she leaves, she won't have to take anything from you beyond what's legally required. This was too much information. I felt overwhelmed, confused, angry, and strangely relieved all at the same time. I need to go, I said, standing up. Daniel. Kaden stood too. For what it's worth, I think you're a decent guy who got caught in a situation that was nobody's fault. Lindsay speaks highly of you. She says you deserve to be with someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved. And that's not her? Not anymore. Probably not for a while now, if either of you had been honest with yourselves. I left the Goldman Sachs building feeling like I was walking through a fog. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my wife, my life, had been turned upside down in the space of an hour. Lindsay wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to leave me. Had been planning it for almost a year. While I'd been worrying about surprising her with pizza and planning weekend trips to San Antonio, she'd been systematically preparing for a life without me. But the strangest part was that I wasn't as devastated as I thought I should be. Angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But underneath all of that was something I hadn't expected. Relief. Relief that I finally understood why our conversations had become so surface level. Relief that I knew why she'd seemed distant and distracted. Relief that there was a reason our physical intimacy had dwindled to almost nothing over the past year. And maybe, if I was being completely honest with myself, relief that someone had finally acknowledged what I'd been afraid to admit. Our marriage had been dying a slow death for a long time. I drove around Austin for 2 hours trying to process everything Kaden had told me. Finally, I ended up at Zilker Park, sitting by the lake where Lindsay and I used to come when we were dating. It was where I'd proposed to her actually during the kite festival on a perfect spring day when everything felt possible. That seemed like a lifetime ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay, working late again tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. Love you. Did she mean it or was it just habit? Had our entire relationship become nothing more than comfortable routine and polite lies? I texted back, okay. We need to talk when you get home. 3 dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, is everything okay? Just some things we should discuss. Nothing urgent. Okay. I'll try not to be too late. I knew she was probably with Kaden right now, maybe telling him about my cryptic text message. Maybe they were discussing what to do if I'd somehow figured out their secret. Well, they were about to find out. I went home and waited. I cleaned the house, did some laundry, made myself a sandwich I couldn't taste. At 9:47 p.m., I heard her key in the lock. Hey, she said, coming into the living room where I was sitting on the couch. She looked nervous, which was unusual for Lindsay. She was typically composed, confident, unflappable. Hey, I replied. Come sit with me. She perched on the edge of the armchair across from me instead of sitting on the couch like she normally would. Another sign that she knew something had changed. I talked to Kaden Mitchell today, I said simply. All the color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, "Oh, that's it? Oh, Daniel, how long were you planning to keep lying to me?" She started crying then, not the delicate tears of someone trying to manipulate a situation, but the ugly, heartbroken sobs of someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. "I'm sorry," she managed between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen like this." "How did you mean for it to happen?" "I was going to tell you. After Christmas. I had it all planned out. I was going to suggest counseling first to see if we could fix things, and then if that didn't work." "You were going to leave me?" "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. We sat in silence for several minutes while she cried and I tried to figure out what I was supposed to feel. The strange thing was I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad, definitely. Disappointed. But not the rage I'd expected. "Why?" I asked finally. "Because we're not happy," she said, wiping her eyes. "Either of us. We haven't been for a long time, but we've been too afraid to admit it." "I thought we were happy." "Daniel, when was the last time we talked about anything that mattered? Really talked, not just logistics and schedules and who's going to pick up milk from the store?" I couldn't answer. "When was the last time we made love instead of just having sex out of obligation?" I couldn't answer that either. "When was the last time you asked me about my dreams or I asked about yours?" "You're writing a book," I said quietly. She looked surprised. "Kaden told you? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," she sighed. "Because I knew you'd think it was stupid. A waste of time. Something that distracted from practical concerns like the mortgage and your business and all the grown-up responsibilities we're supposed to focus on." "Would I have said that?" "Honestly? Yes. Not meanly, but you would have found a way to discourage it. You always do when I mention wanting to try something new or different." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. She was right. I had a history of responding to her ideas with practical concerns and worst-case scenarios. It was my way of protecting us from financial risk or disappointment, but I could see now how it might have felt like I was protecting us from joy instead. "Tell me about the book," I said. "What?" "Your novel. Tell me about it." She looked at me suspiciously like this might be a trap. "It's about a woman who discovers her husband isn't who she thought he was." "Art imitating life?" "More like life imitating art. I started writing it before Kaden. Before I really admitted to myself how unhappy I was." "Are you happy now? With Kaden?" She considered the question. "I don't know. I think I could be. We want the same things. We talk about books and politics and travel and ideas. We challenge each other. And I don't challenge you." "You comfort me," she said gently. "You make me feel safe and stable and cared for. Those are wonderful things, Daniel. They're just not enough anymore." I nodded. It hurt to hear, but I understood. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want a divorce," she said quietly. "But I want us to stay friends if possible. I want to be fair about money and the house and everything else. And I want you to know that this isn't about you not being good enough. You're a wonderful man. You're just not the right man for who I've become." "And Kaden is?" "Maybe. We're taking things slow, trying to figure out if what we have can work outside of the circumstances that brought us together. But Daniel, even if things don't work out with him, I still want the divorce." I sat there looking at this woman I'd loved for 10 years, really looking at her maybe for the first time in months, and I realized that somewhere along the way she'd become a stranger. Not through any fault of hers or mine, but just because people grow and change and sometimes they grow in different directions. "Okay," I said. "Okay. Let's get a divorce." She blinked in surprise. "Just like that?" "Lindsay, I've been sitting here for 3 hours trying to figure out why I'm not more upset about this. And I think it's because part of me has known for a while that something was wrong between us. I just didn't want to face it." "So you're not angry?" "I'm hurt that you lied to me. I'm disappointed that you chose to have an affair instead of talking to me. But angry about the divorce? No. I think maybe you're right. Maybe we both deserve better than what we've become." We talked until 3 a.m. that night. Really talked for the first time in years. About when things started to go wrong between us, about the dreams we'd given up, about the people we wanted to become. It was the most honest conversation we'd had since the early days of our relationship, and it made me realize how much we'd both been holding back. Lindsay moved out the following weekend. She went to stay with her sister temporarily while we figured out the legal and financial details. We agreed to use a mediator instead of lawyers, to keep things as amicable as possible. The house felt empty without her, but not devastatingly so. More like when you finally clean out a closet and realize how much space you have for new things. 2 weeks after Lindsay left, I did something completely unexpected. I called Kaden. Daniel? He sounded surprised to hear from me. I was wondering if you wanted to get a beer, I said. Who's Amanda? Kaden asked. Daniel's girlfriend, Lindsay said, grinning at my embarrassed expression. He's been very mysterious about her. She's not my girlfriend, I protested. We've only been on a few dates. Aha, Lindsay said knowingly. That's not what your face says when you talk about her. Amanda was a nurse at St. David's Medical Center who'd brought her vintage Mustang to my shop for restoration. We'd started talking about muscle cars and somehow ended up discussing everything from books to travel to our shared love of hiking. She was funny, intelligent, and refreshingly direct about what she wanted from life. More importantly, she was interested in who I was now, not who I'd been with Lindsay. She encouraged my business ambitions, challenged my opinions, and made me feel like the best version of myself. Bring her to the barbecue next weekend, Lindsay said. Jake and Melissa are throwing their annual end-of-summer party, and I know they'd love to meet her. The idea of bringing a new girlfriend to meet my ex-wife and her boyfriend at a mutual friend's party should have been weird. But somehow with Lindsay and Kaden, it didn't feel weird at all. It felt like the natural evolution of people who'd learned to care about each other in a different way. A year later, I was working late in my shop when I got a call from Lindsay. Turn on channel 7, she said without preamble. What? Why? Just do it. Trust me. I found an old TV in the office and tuned to the local news. The anchor was interviewing a woman about her debut novel, which had just hit the New York Times bestseller list. The woman was Lindsay. The double life has resonated with readers across the country, the anchor was saying. It's being called a masterful psychological thriller that explores the secrets we keep from the people closest to us. I watched my ex-wife talk confidently about her book, about the writing process, about her plans for a sequel. She was poised, articulate, and clearly in her element. This was the Lindsay she'd been trying to become during our marriage, the one who'd felt trapped by our conventional life. I'm so proud of you, I said when she called back after the interview. Thank you, she said, and I could hear that she was crying. Daniel, I need to tell you something. What's that? I dedicated the book to you. I was quiet for a moment, surprised. Why? Because you gave me the greatest gift anyone ever has. You let me go without making it ugly. You supported my decision even when it hurt you. That kind of grace, it's rare. You gave me a gift too, I said. You forced me to become the person I was supposed to be instead of the person I thought I should be. 2 years after our divorce, Lindsay married Kaden in a small ceremony in Colorado. I wasn't there, that would have been too weird, but she sent me photos afterward. She looked beautiful, radiant, like someone who'd finally found where she belonged. Amanda and I got engaged that same year. She said yes after I proposed at the same spot by Lake Austin where I'd proposed to Lindsay a decade earlier. But this time, it felt right in a way that my first proposal never had. Amanda and I wanted the same things, challenged each other in productive ways, and had built a relationship based on who we actually were rather than who we thought we should be. The night before our wedding, Amanda found me sitting on our back porch, looking up at the stars. Having second thoughts? She asked, settling beside me. About marrying you? Never. I was just thinking about how strange life is. How sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing. You mean the divorce? I mean all of it. Lindsay's affair, the lies, the betrayal, the whole mess. If none of that had happened, I'd still be trapped in a marriage that was slowly suffocating both of us. I'd still be working for Rodriguez instead of running my own business. I'd still be the guy who was afraid to take risks. And I'd still be single, wondering why I couldn't find a good man, Amanda said, taking my hand. Do you think Lindsay and I could have figured it out on our own? Without the crisis? Amanda considered the question. Honestly? Probably not. You were both too comfortable with being unhappy. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to wake people up. She was right. Lindsay's betrayal had been devastating at the time, but it had also been liberating. It had forced both of us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for years. 5 years post-divorce, I ran into Lindsay at the airport in Dallas. We were both traveling for work. She was heading to New York for a book tour, and I was flying to Los Angeles to look at a rare Ferrari that a collector wanted restored. We had a 2-hour layover and ended up having dinner together at one of those overpriced airport restaurants. You look good, she said, and meant it. Happy. So do you? 3 bestsellers now. 4 actually. The new one comes out next month. She showed me her phone wallpaper, a photo of her and Kaden hiking in the mountains somewhere, both grinning and covered in mud. What about you? How's married life treating you? Amanda's pregnant, I said, unable to keep the grin off my face. Daniel, that's wonderful. When? 6 months. We just found out it's a boy. Lindsay teared up. I'm so happy for you. You're going to be an amazing father. Thanks. That means a lot, coming from you. We talked about kids and careers and the strange turns our lives had taken. Lindsay mentioned that she and Kaden were trying to have a baby too, but were having trouble conceiving. We're looking into fertility treatments, she said. It's stressful, but we're optimistic. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. I never thanked you properly, she said as we were boarding our respective flights. For what? For not making me the villain of our story. You could have told people I was a cheating wife who destroyed our marriage. Instead, you told them we grew apart and decided to end things amicably. That's what happened. That's what happened after we both decided to handle it like adults. But the cheating part, that was on me. And you never used it against me even when you had every right to. What would have been the point? Hurting you wouldn't have made me feel better. She hugged me then, right there in the middle of the Dallas airport, and whispered, "Thank you for letting me become who I was supposed to be." "Thank you for forcing me to become who I was supposed to be," I replied. As I watched her walk toward her gate, I reflected on how much we'd both changed since that horrible day when I discovered her affair. The betrayal that had felt like the end of the world had actually been the beginning of our real lives. Lindsay had become a successful novelist, married to a man who appreciated her ambition and creativity. I had built the custom restoration business I'd always dreamed of and married a woman who loved the person I actually was, not the person I thought I should be. Sometimes the people we love aren't the people we're meant to be with forever. Sometimes they're just the people who help us become who we're supposed to become. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you can look back on the worst betrayal of your life and recognize it for what it really was. The painful but necessary push that set you free. 6 months later, Amanda and I welcomed Daniel Jr. into the world. Lindsay sent flowers and a card that read, "For little Daniel, may you always have the courage to become exactly who you're meant to be. Love, your honorary Aunt Lindsay." Kaden sent a vintage model car for the baby's nursery with a note. "From one car guy to a future car guy. Congratulations to you both." 2 months after that, Lindsay called to tell me she was pregnant. The fertility treatments had worked and she and Kaden were expecting twins. "Twins?" I said. "Lindsay, that's incredible. How are you feeling?" "Terrified and excited and grateful and overwhelmed all at the same time." "Sounds about right. Daniel, I want to ask you something and feel free to say no." "What's that?" "Would you and Amanda consider being the twins' godparents? I know it's unconventional, but you're still one of my oldest friends, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have looking out for my children if something happened to Kaden and me." I was quiet for so long that Lindsay asked if I was still there. "I'm here," I said. "I'm just surprised and honored. Let me talk to Amanda, but I think she'd love that." Amanda did love it. She cried when I told her, and said it was the most beautiful example of forgiveness and growth she'd ever seen. "Your ex-wife wants us to be godparents to her children with the man she left you for," she said, shaking her head in wonder. "And it doesn't feel weird or wrong. It feels like the most natural thing in the world." "We've all come a long way," I said. "You've all chosen to come a long way," she corrected. "It would have been easier to stay angry and bitter. Instead, you chose to build something better from the ashes." Last month, we celebrated the twins' first birthday at Lindsay and Kaden's house in Westlake Hills. Their home was beautiful. All clean lines and natural light, the kind of sophisticated space Lindsay had always wanted but that we'd never been able to afford. I watched her chase her toddlers around the backyard while Kaden manned the grill and Amanda helped set up the party decorations. Little Daniel was napping in his carrier, exhausted from playing with his cousins. "Hard to believe this all started with pizza and lies," Amanda said, coming up beside me. "Sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the best endings," I replied. Lindsay caught my eye across the yard and smiled, then picked up her daughter and spun her around, both of them laughing. Kaden walked over and kissed Lindsay's forehead, taking their son from her arms. They looked like a family that belonged together. More importantly, they looked like people who had fought for their happiness and won. As for me, I had everything I'd never known I wanted. A thriving business, a wife who challenged and supported me in equal measure, a son who would grow up seeing what a healthy marriage looked like, and the unexpected gift of maintaining a friendship with the woman who had once been my whole world. The betrayal that had destroyed my first marriage had taught me the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes the most generous thing you can do for someone is set them free to become who they're meant to be. Even if it means they have to break your heart to get there. even if it means watching them build a life with someone else. Even if it takes years to understand that their betrayal was actually the greatest gift they could have given you. Because in the end, we were all exactly where we belonged. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.